It's time for a little takedown.
Office buildings in the United States, to some degree also around the world, because the pandemic, people got used to staying at home, and it was actually more profitable for them.
So it's more profitable. I suppose when you take into consideration that the average American spends $8,466 per year on commuting expenses, which equates to about 19% of their income, by the way, you're complaining that the employees' expenses aren't high enough. The reason is still somewhat peculiar, but let's see what else you should not have said.
To stay at home because, one, they didn't work as hard, regardless of what they tell you.
You won't disclose your country club golf and yacht schedule to us. So inevitably, we have to look at productivity data. And for that, we will turn to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, an entity that just doesn't blow anecdotal misinformation, but provides us with the following data. In the first few weeks of the COVID-19 recession, around 20 million people lost their jobs, with half of those losses occurring in the last 2 weeks of March 2020. On the tail of these unprecedented job losses, labor productivity grew at an annualized rate of 11.2% in Q2 of 2020 and an average hourly wage increase. But of course, adjacent to the first point here, where workers do not incur the same commuting costs of the past, the increase in wages and decrease in commuting expenses does not seem to sit well with the 1%. Because, of course, more money and less physical presence equals autonomy. And if you're scared to death that people discover that they do not need you, you will do everything in your power to force them to see it your way. But, moving on.
And the second is they don't spend money to commute. They can make their lunch at home. They don't have to buy expensive clothes, and so their incomes are...
The obsolete windbag really said the quiet part out loud. Or did he? Well, actually, he only sells you what he thinks you will buy, and he does that by transferring guilt onto the shoulders of employees. What he doesn't say is that commercial building owners desperately need workers to come back to the offices because it's the only way to keep tenants, organizations, in their buildings. No tenant, no rental, and no rental, no income. And now we've arrived to where the billionaires are actually concerned. Commercial real estate is a bit of a different animal than residential real estate, and that is especially concerning financing. They're all exposed by hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in the real estate market on the commercial side. Looking at each portfolio company, you'll notice that most of them have actually billions in property values in their holdings. Again, their majority of buildings are only held though and operated, but not owned and operated, which brings us to the woes of commercial real estate financing. For example, when most banks write a 10-year fixed-rate commercial loan, there is always a provision that calls for one rate adjustment, or a reset as it's called, at the end of 5 years. And guess what's about to come up for most of these portfolio companies? Yes, reset time. The rate is then fixed for the next 5 years. And they continue to restructure these loans in 5-year intervals based on the cost of borrowing money at the time of restructuring, and then they intend to amortize the entire thing over 25 years. What we know is that the Feds have increased rates, and the rates aren't expected to come down anytime soon. And for an organization that holds billions of dollars in portfolio, even the smallest rate increase can wipe out their profits or leave them with negative cash flow, especially when the property lease income is diminished or doesn't take place altogether because, guess what? Yes, people work from home. The final result is that most of these billionaire clowns are heavily overleveraged, and before they openly admit that they desperately need us to come back to work from the office, which translates into their tenants extending their lease durations, including baked-in annual leases and increases, they rather tell us that we're overpaid and underproductive. Tough luck though, Cookie. Your financial fate really does not concern us. Go kick rocks somewhere, ideally while you lose all your commercial assets. Unfortunately, most of them were smart enough to protect their personal assets, but at the end of the day, we'll come for those too.